Welcome to Talking in Stations. I'm Matterall. Today I'm joined by Ashterothi.
Greetings, fellow Empyreans. I am Ashterothi. I hope people appreciate this new setup, and I hope to get some water coming from the wormholes soon. Yay, water!
We also have with us today Hateless. How's it going, Hateless?
Hey guys, how are you doing?
All right. We're all good. We have a different setup. It's evolving, so please excuse our technical issues. We have a lot to talk about today. Both these guys are going to take us through Marauders and tell us what changed and what the actual experience is like. So, Ashterothi, why don't you start? Tell us what it's like, and then we'll go to Hateless.
Sure thing. Let me go down the patch notes, including the Marauders that we got today, because the thing is, we talked about this yesterday, or the last couple of days, but as it turns out, what we ended up getting is slightly different than what was originally defined to us. So, where is it? Okay, so first of all, the Guardians Gala is ended, as we knew. So, although oddly enough, I still saw it in the agency, but if you click on it, it doesn't do anything. If there's any questions, it's over. Next, we have the increase in the Bastion module. It has increased its rate of fire it basically doubles your rate of fire, which is a major DPS bonus, which is what we talked about last week. However, last week when this was first introduced, they said that this was going to increase the Bastion module's setting to 90 seconds. And a lot of people were really found that problematic, especially with the relationship to micro jump drive. What has happened is they've actually done, not only did they revert that change, but they went the opposite direction. So they were like, hey, Marauder pilots, we love you, and made the Bastion duration now 30 seconds instead of 60. There's still that combat timer afterwards that starts at the end of your Bastion, but at least it's going to start now 30 seconds earlier. And you can also drop out of for remote resistance or remote repair or whatever sooner too. Now, in addition to that, the hack changes that were kind of alluded to at the same time ended up coming after all, and these guys are kind of nasty, but it really boils down to the survivability of heavy assault cruisers, specifically the assault damage control and their signature radius bonus. So assault damage control is a damage control that can only be used by assault frigates and assault cruisers, and the duration of it has a passive mode and an active mode. In its passive mode, it works a little bit worse than a normal damage control. In its active mode, it provides amazing resistances for a very short 10 to 15 second period of time. That being said, that duration as of today has been reduced by 25%. So now all assault damage controls have had their time reduced by 1/4. And passive hull resist bonus has been reduced from 30% to 25% for Tech 1 and 40% to 30% for Tech 2. This is the hull resistance bonus, which is the least impactful resistance bonus for a lot of people when it comes to damage controls. But it is the resistance that damage controls are mostly focused on. So it makes sense here. So really what you're seeing here is that reduction in the assault damage control activation time. Moving on, you see the other major change to heavy assault cruisers, which is heavy assault cruisers used to have a significant reduction in the micro warp drive signature radius penalty, and the same as assault frigates. However, that has been now removed. Micro warp drives are known to get you from point A to point B quickly, but are not really good for damage mitigation because the signature bloom that they give you makes it so you're roughly just as easy to hit after the fact than before, even if you're going at your full speed, let alone if you're not going at your full speed. But what the difference here was that hacks would have a bonus, same as assault frigates, that makes it so that that penalty, that bloom of signature, was significantly reduced, which made it so that they could use micro warp drives without suffering the micro warp drive bloom. And this is part of like an overall like varying ways of doing props, with everything from like Sancho using really cool ABs to all the way up to this. But here we have that bonus being removed completely. It's not being reduced. It's not being whatever. You just no longer get that micro warp drive signature radius penalty reduction. So now hacks that you choose to use micro warp drives will still go just as fast, but they're going to be significantly easier to hit. And then on top of that, we also have the buffs that we knew about coming from the Wubbles, which are the stasis webification probes, which I'm very glad that CCP has now adopted that name, and Wubbles is officially in the patch notes now. But the web strength has been increased from 30% to 40%, so they're nearly as good as normal webs. And the area effect range has gone from 10% to 10 kilometers to 15 kilometers, which means if you fire it off on a gate, you would actually cover all of the jump range of a normal size gate. Its warm-up duration has also been reduced from 3 seconds to 2 seconds, which give people less time to get out of the way or react to it. All right. Now, not only did the Bastion change, but Marauders across the board got their lock range increased by 30%. This seems, if I remember correctly, this is in line with a previous buff that was given to other battleships and represents the increased range of the Bastion module. And also their sensor strength was increased by 9, which from my understanding has caused some minor problems, making Marauders very difficult to probe at the moment, which is kind of hilarious. On top of that, the Varger has had a 5% bonus to its projectile rate of fire, has been changed to a 7.5% damage bonus. This is probably to make it because the Bastion module is a rate of fire bonus. So now instead of stacking 2 rate of fire bonuses, they've standardized it. So it's damage bonus and the rate of fire bonus is in the Bastion. Likewise, the Paladin has had its capacitor capacity changed to a reduction in large energy turret capacitor need. This is the solution that they've come up with, probably because that large energy turret capacitor need has just doubled with the doubling of the rate of fire.
Do not agree with that change, by the way. I'm kind of frustrated by it. We'll talk about it later.
It's controversial, but we can dig into it. The Chronos has just had the capacitor just flat out increased by 8,000 gigajoules, and it has its recharge rate reduced from 17 minutes, to 17 minutes and 30 seconds. I don't know what it was before. But both of those are recharge buffs because the capacitor recharge rate is based on, basically it recharges its total amount in the amount of time. So if you reduce the time or if you increase the amount, it increases the amount that it recharges per second in order to make that recharge happen. Okay, next we have the Eris had its reduction in mass penalty increased from 15% to 20%. So now it can move super fast, even while plated, even better than it was before. And it had its rate of fire increased from 5% to 7.5%, which now means that it just gained roughly, 2.5 times 5? 15?
Oh, I gotta get my son
12,
to do math.
13.
Aren't we Eve players? Don't we know how to do math?
Either way, whatever.
I'll do it. Hold on, I got
good increase in some straight up rate of fire damage increase. Cool. Flycatcher gains shield HP bonus. Heretic gains armor HP bonus. So everybody gets better tank when it comes to these kinds of things. Well, everyone except for the
Saber.
The Saber, which is doing fine. Trust me. Yeah. The Monitor has added a drug bay and a charge bay. This is because the Monitor is an FC ship, so it is very specific about what you're allowed to bring. Very small everything, because otherwise it's just a super tanky ship that they don't want people to abuse. So now they've specifically allowed you to have a charge bay and a drug bay, so that way you can have your drug to consume, and you can have charges for the one slot, I think, that you get with your Monitor.
It's for your probe launcher, because
that's what it is.
You previously couldn't carry a full second set of probes.
Oh, that is Gregorian. I forgot to introduce him. Sorry.
Yeah. Also, Exit Instinct on monitors is going to be OPAF.
So then, the Revelation nerf that we knew was coming. Well, yeah, it's a bit weird. So the power grid has been reduced from 780 megawatt to 700 megawatt, but to compensate for this, beam lasers, not pulse lasers, but beam lasers, XL beam lasers, have had their power need reduced by 10,000 megawatt, and its CPU reduced by 10 teraflops. So beam lasers are now easier to fit, but pulse lasers, by contrast, will now be harder to fit because you'll have less feeling to work with. Also, stealth buff to avatars for some reason. And then finally, structures. Remove target painter resistance from structures. I don't know why that was relevant, important, or there.
It's so that the FC in a Monitor can tag the kill mail.
Well, you could always have done that. It's just what the resistance is just reducing the effect of its bloom. So because
previously you couldn't even activate the module on a structure.
Okay, that makes sense. Weirdly worded then. And then finally, there also was there's a fix in the string of the Guardian Gala 2v2 cruiser event, which is over and fixed an issue that prevented players from updating their portraits. That's it for patch notes.
All right. Awesome patch notes. Thanks. All right. So what's the real world experience like, Hateless?
Oh my god, Marauders are so much fun. That's the TLDR. So they effectively got double DPS with the sensor strength bonus. One thing that is interesting is the Bastion module has a bonus on it that gives a Marauder plus 1000% sensor strength. I'm not sure if this was there previously or not, but this 1000% to sensor strength combined with a sensor booster makes it so that while you're siege with an ECCM script, your sensor strength is bigger than your signature radius. That means that it is incredibly difficult to scan down. Somebody will have to have max skills with implants to scan you down reliably.
I neither have the compunction to go deeply into why this is, but basically as your sensor strength goes above your
it caps at even. So the effect. So we tried adding a second ECCM and it didn't make it.
What are the two stats?
It's your signature radius and your ECM and your sensor strength combines to make a number, and that number dictates your scan difficulty, and then that is compared up against the scan probe sensor strength is what happens.
So once upon a time, there were Tengus that could make themselves unscannable, and they were called slippery Petes, and they were very effective. But nobody would have expected a Marauder to be able to do this. I'm sorry. Go on. I just wanted to make sure that people understood what exactly was happening.
So in order to scan down a Marauder now that is in siege mode and not using his micro warp drive, you need really good skills, and you cannot do it at more than 0.5 AUs. So all 8 of your probes have to be on top of its head, period. There's no avoiding this. Basically, what that means is that if you're running in a Marauder and you see probes start to show up, you have time to drop siege, align out, and leave before they even get the scan on you. That's what that means. It is now relatively okay to siege in a Marauder as long as you're watching D-scan. That is a huge implication to being able to run anomalies, or not anomalies, but being able to run escalations and being able to actually use these things in space, especially in high sec with suicide gankers and all that. It doesn't mean that they're impossible to kill, or they're just more difficult. And that's awesome. So the practicality of actually using a Marauder, they're viable as a tool now. They can still be caught in gates and on stations and whatnot, but they have a lot of tools at their disposal that makes the gate fight and the engagement there on the gate a lot more in their favor.
Because Marauders were kind of a favorite thing to kill, right? People knew that they were missioning ships, and weren't they often targets inside of high sec?
Yeah, it basically outside of like haulers and stuff. If a subcap is going to get ganked, it's probably going to be a Marauder. Mostly because like if you have a Marauder, you're going to bling it, and that's the stuff that they're going for. They're looking for those X types, and you put those on Marauders. Macarials may or may not, but a Marauder will have nice stuff on it.
What do you think,
Possibly. Cheap Marauder is actually surprisingly effective. You don't need to put any shiny tank modules on them. You just need the 4 damage mods to be shiny, and they absolutely obliterate missions.
But just to the point of them being targeted, is this some of the stuff that they have changed seems to make them more viable to use? What do you think they're thinking there, the developers?
I think that. Let's say that one more time. That went over my head a little bit.
Yeah, the changes that they just made that you described, making it harder to find these things while they're at work. Why would they have made those changes?
To make them more appealing to use. And I think that was directly their reason to do this, is to make it a more appealing ship and a goal to have. Surprisingly enough, full clearing missions with these Marauders now is equivalent to running Abyss. Like, you'll make similar income. It has brought missions as a whole in line with other content that you can do. It's a significant buff to mission running, and of course, nullsec ratting and all that, because they're actually viable to use in these scenarios.
I want to separate out the idea of using like the actual changes and the specific sensor strength change and the quirkiness of it, because there's a very good chance that they will iterate on this, because that change was not that was part of the ones that were not part of the original change. That was the ones where people were like, hey, by the way, what about the fact that like the lock range changed from the battleships last year and whatnot? And then CCP Rise was like, oh yeah, that's right, and threw it in there. So it's possible that that got tested less, and that's how this kind of thing slips through, because it's kind of a quirk. And so it'll be interesting to see how CCP opts to deal with this. It is possible that everybody forgot that there was a sensor
Close
change.
close in on your
Bastion, and
mic a little
therefore
bit. I think you're dropping out.
sorry. It could be possible that everybody forgot about this, the bonus on the Bastion itself, and so the practical effects of this didn't get seen until now. So when it was like, oh yeah, of course the Marauder needs to have the same changes that the battleships did, and then it was like, oh yeah, this is why the change didn't happen in the first place. So I wouldn't be surprised if that specific part of it didn't get looked at, because I'm reasonably sure that CCP didn't make that change with the idea of making Marauders difficult to probe in mind. They may decide that that's cool if this makes people start running Marauders in low-sec more, you better damn well believe that CCP is going to be like, hell yeah, we meant to do that. But otherwise...
This makes them super viable level 5 mission runners.
Yeah, and so that actually may end up being intentional, or it may end up being kept for that reason. But I believe that that change was part of the whole, like, the secondary pass that they did after announcing the original change.
Right. Well, Hateless, what's it like?
Double DPS is awesome. Their rate of the fact that they did it with rate of fire makes it so that if you split their guns into 2 groups, they delete small things really fast. So mission running in them is super easy, as you can kill almost everything before it even starts to get close to you. And it just basically, like, all I've really done with them is missions. So that's really all I can speak on. Yeah. But they are very fast at clearing NPCs, and it's honestly a lot of fun to fly them.
So they're a better value proposition, and they work faster, and they're harder to find. And do you think that's it's interesting what Ashterothi really said? It really interests me that they might be primed to be used in more dangerous areas like low sec, whereas before they wouldn't.
Definitely so. So they also have the 3 utility highs that are available to them. They can have teeth and can defend themselves in a lot of ways. So I could definitely see them being used in null and in low sec as a farming tool. And is definitely a carrot given to people that want to crab and want to rat. And the fact that they have more DPS allows them to defend themselves in a lot of situations a lot better than they did before.
Yeah, plus a Marauder has, like, it's the whole package, right? So it's the thing that comes in and destroys things. It tractor beams things in. It tears up the wreckage and salvages it. I mean, it's the whole package.
Yeah, you were asking about, like, what their methodology was for this or whatever, what they were thinking. And I literally was like, I believe that they think, hey, the people that really love Marauders, because there are people that really, really love Marauders. What do they want? Why do they love Marauders? What do they want out of it? And let's just, like, uncompromisingly give them that. Like, the Marauder is that Tech 2 battleship that everyone always wanted. It was that high-end PvE thing to work towards the Tech 2 for PvE that has never really existed. You know, there has been a good place for Marauders before, but things like Macarials and Rattlesnakes easily keep up with them. So, you know, it's always seemed like I even at one point I bought a Paladin and then I used it once and then I sold it because it wasn't worth it compared to the Macarial. But this truly feels like they made the Marauder fit the fantasy of what you want. It does it brings out the damage. You won't be able to contest these things in event sites. It is unquestionably the kings of mission runners. Macarials are still the queens of mission runners, don't get me wrong. Bargus are up there too. But you know what I mean? But, like, this really does allow the Marauders to really feel like they lock in their position And I think that that's a really good thing. And what I really find it, I'm going to be interested to see what happens when these tools really start to be played with, because 2 billion ISK, 3 billion ISK is not that much, and being able to deploy 3K DPS, on point from 40K is pretty awesome, especially in scenarios where dreads aren't allowed. One of the things that we were talking about in TIS Discord, and again, this is sort of crazy because the idea of it being used in this sort of fight is super crazy, but the idea of using Marauders in high sec in PvP scenarios isn't that crazy anymore. Like, they bring so much to the table, and with no predators in their field, they're going to be they're the battleship that Mr. Hyde always wanted. That's all it is.
Yeah. Let me just make this very clear about Marauders. They are very good alone. They're not good in groups.
True.
Nice. Well, I guess that makes them more of the solo ratters kind of a ship, rather than some kind of doctrine that gets these things used in the wrong way, like the Macarial was, right? That was supposed to be a pirate ship. You were supposed to move around fast, assault things, and get out quick. And then all of a sudden people were like, hey, these are cheap. Let's make 100 of them and put them in a fleet. So maybe the Marauder stays in that place. Now, why aren't they good?
People bring up ESS defenses. Oh, hold on. I want to stress out, though, because we talked about this before, and people keep bringing up ESS defense. And it was pointed out to me the one fundamental problem with bringing Marauders or any battleship into an ESS defense, which is once the defense is over, getting the ship out.
Yeah.
Because it's a giant scram bubble. So unless you've got some plan to slow boat that battleship out of the scram radius, good luck.
Can they use the micro jump drive?
No, because it's a scram.
Oh.
Yeah. So they have to AB out or slow boat out, one of the two. And it takes them a while to get out of there. Marauders are inherently not fast. They're kind of big and bulky. Whereas the Macarial and Nightmare and those guys, they can actually move with an afterburner. And I think like 400 or 500 meters a second tops with a Varger, which is the fastest of the four with an afterburner.
Now, why don't these work in a big group, Hateless?
So when the Marauder's big strength, where all this power comes from, is when you activate its Bastion Module. And the Bastion Module disallows any remote aid of any kind. It cannot receive any assistance. So it can't receive sensor boosts. It can't receive the big one, which is remote reps. And it can't receive a capacitor. So it has a cap on what it can survive. If it has more friends, it doesn't mean it can survive more. It just means that you bring it to fight more things. There's a limit to what it can handle. And they are incredibly susceptible to nuke pressure, which means if you energy neutralize them, yes, they can run cap boosters and bring 3,200 cap boosters, but that only survives for so long. And they are very susceptible to nuke pressure to shut them down. And then they are also, they can't receive remote aid. So they're sieged up. They can't get remote reps from their buddy. Yes, they're doing a lot of DPS. Yes, they're doing this, but a couple Nesters and a couple of battleships would easily take down a Marauder.
Any scenario in which you'd rely on remote assistance, they're going to struggle in. Though they are amazingly capable of their own independent, repping and whatnot. But the issue is that the Bastion module is also providing a fair chunk of their tank. And so the idea of dropping out of Bastion in order to receive remote reps isn't really great either. In a lot of ways, these really are baby dreads. Because in Siege, you don't get remote assistance, right?
Correct. If you see a dread, they cannot receive reps.
Right. So it's that's my point. Is that so? While I don't think that these are practical all the time, if you think about it on a subcap level, these are now in every way dreadnoughts, but they have no apex above them like Titans and Supers to counter them. So while yes, they couldn't spider tank or anything, or they couldn't get remote assistance. If you drop 100 of these things on something, it's going to be very bad for the thing that you drop it on.
Yes.
Zercanus has a Balgorn. Isn't that a natural predator?
Yeah,
for
so
this thing?
Absolutely. Until the Balgorn evaporates from however many 3K DPS these things apply onto them.
Yeah,
That's the point.
I mean, it should be able to, a single Marauder shouldn't have a problem against a single Balgorn. Like with the amount of DPS it does and what it can actually bring to the field. But if there's a couple Balgorns on it, it's not doing anything. Like it'll get shut down. It's not going very far. They're a little too expensive to kind of justify using over something like a Tornado, Catalyst, Vexor, or Tornado, or what is it? It's the Talos that they use to suicide gank in high sec. So equivalent bombing tools that are used in suicide ganks, they're not going to be used for suicide ganking. Although they do have an insane amount of DPS per pilot, they're not cost effective compared to other tools that make DPS per million of ISK spent.
I could very well see a bastioned Marauder a chunk of distance off of a gate as part of a gate camp. Like have a couple other people be the tackle. Yeah, in low sec or something like that. And just sit a Vargur at like 70.
Yeah, I could see that too.
They could be very good for high sec structure bashes too.
Yeah.
Yep. I mean, anytime that you would like a Leshak pre-spooled, it's right there.
Well, yeah, I've heard. Pre-spooled, yeah, but Leshaks are better and cheaper at that sort of a thing. And I've also heard there's a lot of places where you would prefer a Dread over a Marauder.
But not in high sec structure bashes, which is
right. Exactly.
I'm going to tell you right now, these things
high-sec,
eat ammo. These are
the kings of high sec.
Yeah, so there's another downside for structure bashing and things with a lot of EHP. They chew on ammo, a lot of it. Their rates of fire are frigate rates of fire, and you're paying for large ammo. I think 2-second rate of fire, you end up burning ammo as fast as a Mac, which is a notoriously big problem.
It's like a Gatling gun, right? Like it's just
Paladin.
I broke like 6 crystals today flying the Paladin.
Wow!
I probably went through.
That's why
I cooked through.
That's why you use Tech 1
ammo
ammo in a structure bash.
Yeah. I have never.
For structure bashes, that's not great.
I don't think I've ever broken through crystals.
If you bring a Marauder and use Tech 1 ammo, get out. What are you doing?
That's what you use for structure bashes.
Then don't use a Marauder. What are you doing?
Yeah, they chew through ammo, and that's a big factor. It's not terrible when you're using them for like farming or using things because their damage bonuses are insane. The amount that you get per unit of ammo is really high. They consume it very quickly. So if you're using them to bash on things or you're using them to shoot something for an extended amount of time, they do have an operating cost.
The thing that I really like here is that as these events, which we now seem to be getting events at least once every 2 months, and they seem to be, we're really getting a format for them to be a thing that people can do regularly. One of the questions that's emerged from this is, how can I solo these? And often, like to be the really best solo, Marauders were already starting to show up being really good. Like in the Gala, Marauders were being used very, very frequently. This really locks that in, where it's like, hey man, if you wanna run around high sec and wave your dick around, the Marauder is the way to do it until somebody suicide ganks you. And I really like that. I like the fact that there's this, like, the Marauder, like the whole fantasy of it is this long-term
big badass ship. Like that's
going out there doing everything itself. It has the salvagers, it has the big bay. It doesn't have to go back. It doesn't need to refit. It can just, do long-term operations if it needs to and get the work done. And it really feels like this iteration locks that home, and they're going to become like the top of the line ship when it comes to, especially at the high sec sites of events. If you take them to the danger area.
I'm not a wormhole guy, but
I was about to ask.
Wormhole guys are going to absolutely love this. So
yeah, I saw Cryptid Gaming is specifying they're looking for Marauder pilots in their latest recruitment advertisement.
Yeah, so what's really unique about this is, and wormhole is one big factor about going from wormhole to wormhole, is how much mass you're taking through the wormhole, and the amount of punch that you can bring for the amount of mass that a Marauder has. is exceptionally high, making them very good for wormholes, both hunting people and for evicting people out of the smaller wormholes. They'll be incredibly useful.
Right. It also fits into that. I keep going back to it, but the solo player kind of exploring a hostile world and taking everything he needs with him. It's like if you're a survivalist in Eve and you want to explore wormholes, this might be the ship to take.
I actually have a surprise just for you, Matterall. I'll be right back.
Awesome. I like your octopus. Somebody asked me what was the name of your octopus there?
He was my old stream mascot. I guess now I have the cats, but I got him a couple of years ago. I found him in a basket at Winco. And he has 5 arms, not 8. He's not an octopus, so he's a pentapus. And his name, he used to have a fancy top hat. His Sir Earl Quincy Hydebass V, Esquire.
Okay.
All right. So
All right, what's your
Matterall,
surprise?
I know how much you like the Eon magazines, right?
Yeah.
So Emma was just going through one of her boxes last night, and she pulled out this issue. It's probably backwards. Is it backwards? It's probably backwards. But it's Eon magazine. But this is the issue where they first introduced the Marauders. So I was just reading through, and they have like the description of each of the Marauders and their focuses and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, nice.
So I was just thinking about this. Each of the Marauders, I mean, they are pretty good. Like they're all kind of similar in their bonuses, but they really exemplify their weapon systems, right? Like the Chronos' ability to just bring more DPS than anything else. The Paladin's ability to project huge amounts of DPS. The Golem ability to just do insane amount of damage with when you combine torps with high projection, high application, it gets just silly. And so these ships are designed to be like showcases of the highest level of these militaries.
So
Nice.
where were they yesterday? There was always a better option for outputting DPS than a Marauder. As of yesterday, as of today, now for a given platform, the Marauder is the best ship for that platform.
That's true. Well, like for instance, the Golem was mathematically the best ship for emerging conduits because the Golem has a target painter bonus, which means that you can get your torps to apply perfectly even to the frigates in the emerging conduit sites. So if you do that, then you can destroy a ship every single cycle of your weapon system in an emerging conduit and clear. It was the mathematically fastest way to clear emerging conduits that Fonsui worked out, and a few people played around with it. It's so fast at killing things that you actually could go with polarized to make it go faster because it would kill the threats in the site fast enough that they couldn't kill it, even though it was polarized. It's insane how much damage a Golem could do. And now it's doubled.
Yep.
Right.
I'm interested to see the Marauders. It's the first ship that I see being viable for solo hunting Raznavort, because we've been trying to figure out what ships would be good for it on your own, but it seems to be designed for small groups. This is actually a ship that would be able to hunt Trig in high-sec, which is impressive.
Well, all of the invasion rats. So like Trig, Drifter, well, not Drifters, but Trig, Sleeper, or Trig, Rogue Drones, and Edencom would all be really good targets for the Marauders.
Yeah, we learned last Friday that in order to beat Drifters, you need to escape their doomsday by dodging it, not taking it.
Basically,
so
yeah.
this is
right.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, even a Marauder would crack. In fact, in the video, they killed a Golem just to prove the point.
I got it. Hey, so what's your favorite one, Ashterothi, then Hateless? What's your favorite Marauder?
I mean, I want it to be the Chronos. I'm going to try it again now that it's been buffed. But I've been flying around in the Paladin, and I really like it.
That's what's behind you now.
Right behind me.
Yeah.
Visually, the Chronos, in like actual like how good it actually is, I think the Vargar.
Vargar. Oh, interesting.
Yeah, there's a lot of big Vargar fans, honestly.
I've got a thing for autocannons and mission running. They just the way they apply is really good.
Plus, no capacitor stuff to deal with, right?
Well, it's not that. It's literally the way fall off works. And Vargars have the best fall off. Like Paladins have really good optimal ranges, and you can adjust that optimal range to the job. But you don't have to think when you're flying a Vargar. You just hit F1 and everything dies.
Yeah, so lasers have very long optimal, very short fall off. Projectiles have very short optimal, very long fall off. So this leads to things like the Macarial having a 4K optimal 56K fall off.
83 kilometer fall off with the Vargaras flying today.
Yeah, exactly.
And this is because Amarians and Minmatars are enemies, so their weapons are opposite each other, which I think happens.
Very, very different from each other, yes.
Yeah.
But also, so the Amar Paladin and the Galente Chronos are both damage locked because those weapon systems are damage locked. But the Golem, the Kaldari Golem, and the Mimitar Vargar are not damage locked. So if you're really talking about the tippy top mission ships, then you're going to probably look at those two because they also offer the flexibility to go around and fight whatever you want.
Yeah. Right. Although in a Mars space, the Paladin is exceptionally powerful because it has the EM thermals against like every rat that you come across.
Yes, against the correct enemy, the Galente and the Amar ships are good. Against their chosen enemies.
I think every single Marauder is the best against its specific enemy. There is no kinetic or pure kinetic weapon system that, and the aside from the torpedoes and crews that the Golem has. So like everything else is not as great against Caristas. So if you're whatever space you're running missions in or ratting against, the Marauder that falls in line with that is going to probably be the best performing in that region.
This is generally true across the board when it comes to Amar are really good at fighting Blood Raiders, Scimitar are really good at fighting Angels, etc., etc. The pirates are vulnerable to that Empire's equipment and or their own equipment. For instance, Nightmares are incredibly effective in incursions, and Triglavian ships end up being pretty useful in invasions.
All right.
And the Abyss.
Wow. That was dense, right? With information. So really neat that they made adjustments all the way up until today. And then they just surprised everybody with what the final result was for it. But you guys seem very happy with the Marauders.
And weren't we expecting it to be at least another week before they dropped this update?
Yeah, I was expecting it on Thursday. I wasn't expecting it today. I was really happy to see it come today, though.
Yeah, I want to say that people were expecting it. So there's two things going on here because there's a second update too, which is the Fleet Warp update. Mm-hmm. Those changes did not get put in, right? So the changes that got put onto Sissy yesterday, the fleet changes, all of the lorem ipsum text and other stuff like that, none of that got patched in. The only stuff that got patched in was stuff that was patched in last week when they announced the Marauder changes. So I think that part of the reason why this snuck up on us is because they've also announced the next stuff. And so there's some confusion about what stuff was going to be this week and what stuff is going to be later and when things are. CCP's always been, struggled with messaging these kinds of things. So whatever, it's kind of confusing. But either way, we got the patch today, and yet we're still waiting for another patch. Probably sometime. This is saying that the Fleet Warp patch is probably going to be sometime mid to late next month.
I'd say 2 to 3 weeks is my estimate on it, but
yeah, that's about right.
Yeah, that's what you just said, anyways. Because 3 weeks is mid next month.
Right.
Well, maybe they need to get feedback on this stuff before they launch something else, so they can kind of space out the amount of things they concentrate on when they're trying to fix things, maybe.
I just think that what happened was they came, Christmas season and all that stuff came, and then January, they didn't really communicate much. I think that they're building up towards something big, but they don't know how to communicate it. Because if you think about it, like right now, we should be working towards like a FanFest style event, which would be a big news point. So right now would be like the very first hintings of something, happening. And so this is usually when we are like, there's nothing really being talked about. So it kind of makes sense. But what I think happened was like January, they kind of worried about getting them like figuring out what they wanted to do. And then by the time they had a messaging for that, it was already into the second month. So then they're announcing the quadrant, but then they didn't really announce anything with that quadrant. And then they announced right after that the first patch of the quadrant, and so that was kind of confusing. And then this is the second patch of the quadrant, and so that's kind of confusing. But I think that the reason why this is because like they've been more focused on getting themselves back on track coming out of the winter break, and less on making sure that everything is, the messaging is the last part, if that makes sense.
So I do want to say last year, for the most part, they were like pumping stuff out, patches and balance changes, the ESS and DBS, all that changed. They were pumping things out very rapidly, and they stopped.
Oh,
Well,
he said they stopped,
you
and
cut
somebody
off.
stopped him. Yeah, he must have.
Yeah.
His cat must have pushed the button.
They stopped for a minute. I'll get the camera
Oh, there
back
you
up.
are. Okay, good.
But they stopped for a minute, and I think that was their winter break, and now they're just right back to pumping out content, which I think is, or not content, but changes and balance passes and new things to bring the game forward. And we did see that like 2-month gap where we didn't really see a lot. They left us at the end of, or at the beginning of redistribution with not much coming out as far as like earning more ISK and more income. And this is definitely a big buff in the direction of ratting and earning more income. And it's not as insane as, say, super ratting and other things that we had previously, but it is really good. And I think that we're going to continue to see stuff like this moving forward.
Yeah.
So the first quadrant last year, I was reminded,
Welcome
the first month, January of last year, the main event was the fact that they had this off event, which was the Ravenor Blitz, or the Dragonor Blitz. So they were able to release the Shield Slaves, which had already been basically sitting on the books for anywhere between 6 months to 12 years, depending on how you do your month or math. And the event, which was being pushed by the events/invasions team as they were iterating incredibly aggressively at that time on their AI. So it made sense that they had that available in January, coming straight out of the Christmas break. But and also on top of that, they also had the announcement of quadrants itself. So there was a whole bunch to talk about there. So it made January feel a lot more full and made the flow of the quadrant feel a lot more logical. And then they got their acting gear for the second quadrant, which was the Chapter 3 trailer, which is the high point of the quadrant system last year, in my opinion. So hopefully that's kind of what we're going on here, that they're still like, because as they come back and they go, okay, well, what are we going to do next? Right. So within the first month, they may not even have a full idea of what their plan is for Q2 or whatever, 100% locked in yet. So it would make sense that messaging would struggle into January through February, and they're getting back into the rhythm of things. I'm just going to be hopeful in that one.
Great. Well, let's see if we have any questions. Type them up real quick for you guys. There was a question that you answered in chat there, Hateless. Can you ask that out loud?
So the question answered is, does Bastion module allow for friendly sensor booster or range bonus? The thing about Bastion is when you activate it, remote aid is not allowed. There's a statistic in the Bastion module. Bring it up to read exactly what it says.
Okay, thanks. And while he's doing that, if you have any questions about Marauders specifically, go ahead and put them in there now.
Yeah.
We'll wrap
I'm
up.
pretty sure that that's not allowed.
He's just looking for
You cannot receive remote assistance. It says so on the.
I'm looking for that.
He's just looking for the actual writing to see if there's any.
It should be in the attributes. It should say that there's a negative 100% effectiveness penalty.
I'm looking at them right now. So
I
guess it has remote and penis bonus. That's anti-E-war, so that doesn't. It disallows tethering, and disallows docking, so you can't dock while it's allowed. ECM assistant, no, that's ECM resistance. Cannot be fitted to. It says it somewhere.
In the text, it says, as a side effect of the ionic field created by the Bastion module, beneficial remote repair and capacitor transfer effects are ineffective against the fitted ships. In addition, the lack of power to mobility. So this actually seems to imply, hold on.
Okay, so the result is a greatly increased self-sustenance and boost to the ship's overall damage resistance. Also expanded reach of the vessels halfway through this at farther ranges. Due to the ionic field created by the Bastion Module, most electronic warfare effects, from friend or foe both, will not affect the ship. While in Bastion Module, all weapons, including energy nostrifugers, destabilizers, are unaffected by this field, leaving the ship capacitor as one of the only vulnerable points to defend. As a side effect of the ionic field created by Bastion, beneficial remote repair and capacitor transfer effects are ineffective against it. So maybe you can give remote sensor booster to it.
We'll have to test that out.
But I don't see a reason to do that when its sensor strength is already obscenely high.
Oh,
Well, if you want to use it in a gate camp, you might want to remote SIBO it.
I mean, sensor strength is insane.
Remote assistance independence or impedance bonus is 95%, which is remote assistance, and that is remote sensor booster. So 95% reduction in remote assistance, including sensor boosters, as well as a 95% reduction in sensor dampener.
Yeah, so you're not going to be able to help him much.
You can't really help him much, right? In case
you can't hurt him much either.
Yeah.
Nope.
All right. Another question here. Go ahead. What were you going to say, Ash?
I wanted to point out that somebody else pointed out that there's also a new pack, the Reign Supreme pack, that was being announced by CCP today. I don't have all the details up ahead of me, but if I remember correctly, it's got skins and skill books for recons and Marauders. So if that's interesting, if especially if this change has made you now want to get into Marauders, the Reign Supreme pack is probably a decent pack for you. Otherwise, it's just kind of like their flavor of the week.
I wonder if we're going to have expert systems for Marauders.
Oh boy.
I wonder if that's why.
Are you really doing this right now? We're going to go there?
No. Another question, are they going to go down in price? Because they've obviously spiked. I had 10 Marauders on the market at like 1.5 billion. And I couldn't find them in my inventory because I forgot I put them on the market a long time ago. So they were just sitting there because these Marauders were selling for like 1.1 to 1.3. And boom, they're at 1.7, 1.9 now. So what's going to happen?
So the material costs did not change. There's a lot of excitement. And whenever there's excitement about something in EVE Online, that module or thing or group of things generally goes up in cost because there's a spike in demand. As soon as the market settles and builders adjust and start actually building them because they're profitable to build, they'll come back down.
So the thing about Marauders specifically is that there aren't that many of them comparatively to a lot of other ships. There's no Marauder fleets. There's no Marauder doctrines. There's no, people that have Marauders are people that love Marauders, and then they get their one Marauder or whatever, and then that's theirs. And they don't get a new one until they lose it or something. And so there isn't that many of them just floating around. And therefore, a change in the market would have a significant impact because there's not enough Marauders in reserve to compensate for the new increase in demand. And so you're going to see a major spike, and then it'll start to cool off eventually as market builders, because just because people can build a Marauder, it can take upwards of a week or more to tool a T2 industry pipeline into the correct place, depending on whether or not you have the correct goo and all this other stuff. So it isn't a trivial thing to just produce a new T2 ship. So it will take some time for the market to adjust. This market adjustment is probably going to be more significant than other market adjustments because of how rare Marauders are just normally. But yeah, I see this as a great time to sell a Marauder if you have one.
Yeah. There's a couple other. I wish I'd adjusted before they got totally bought out. But there's a couple other things as well. One is that the scarcity that's going on with CCP isn't really going to affect, or it hasn't affected moon minerals yet. So those prices are relatively stable and plentiful. They're not going up like T1 hulls are. So that means that there will be enough T2 materials to react to be able to do, because these things absorb a lot of T2 materials or moon materials. These things and jump freighters are the only things that really eat up a lot of that kind of thing. However, Snuffed Out destroyed one of the Tataras in Ignoin, which was a place where you could actually do reactions. So reaction prices have adjusted a little bit. They might go up a little bit. Gregorian, you were talking about that. Have you seen that on the market?
Yeah, I do reactions for a decent chunk of my income. My income mainly comes from small scale industry, and after the Tatar went down, I usually deliver my reaction cycles on a Sunday, so I delivered mine basically a few hours after and checked the price that same evening, and it was already up a lot higher than last week.
Yeah. So, but the point
And
is
well,
that might,
I also decided to
yeah.
ask I yeah, another thing I had thought might be a big difference would be since this was a place for trading supers would be uh if that this would lead to third-party intermediaries being used to trade supers in low sec again, since Snuffed Out is knocking down the Freeport keep stars. Rocket
you're talking
X
about, yeah.
since he's a bit of an expert on that sort of thing, if what he thought, and he doesn't think it would be likely for third parties to come back.
Oh no, that's a whole different question, though. We can talk a little bit about that in a minute. But back onto the Marauder subject, the price will stabilize. That's the best prediction that we can all give you. But there will be a spike. I think it'll last a little longer than it usually does. So look for it to last over a month before it. But it depends on who can produce these things. It's a good time to go into production of these things right now for the next 2 or 3 weeks. I would think.
There's
I
a window of
bet you
opportunity, and it's closing as we speak.
Yeah.
I bet you there is a lot of Munin pilots that are currently researching Ravens or doing invention on Ravens.
We'll save that for a different episode because we wanted to go into all these other changes too. Maybe we'll do.
Well, no,
that
what I mean by
tomorrow.
that is that you have a T2 producer. Munins have now significantly dropped in their demand, and so they're not building those anymore. But Caldari ships are that's a Minmatar ship. Oop, my bad. I mean Vargar. So they're switching over to Vargars. They're researching Tempest, whatever. Joke
Yeah.
applies, Minmatar, whatever. Cool. But my
I don't-
point is that they're going to switch over. They got to find a new T2 product to build, and so I figure that those are going to be the guys that are going to transfer over
Yeah.
and start picking up on the Marauder.
Jump
backlog.
freighters and Marauders are what absorb T2 materials in a big way. Besides,
I don't
modules.
think there will be a huge drop in the demand for Munins because for the main use of Munins is really big fleets, and there isn't really something that is coming up to be good enough to displace a hacks, even if their other things might become more common.
Yeah.
Well,
By the way,
we
I wanna-
can talk about that. We were going to tackle that as a separate issue on a different day, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Hack changes.
Yeah. We'll tackle those a different day. We're out of time. I do want to thank Icon 911. He's the one that asked the market question. Also answered the market question. I think he's the one that actually answered it. And he also says that Moon materials actually went down in price mostly because the only thing to mine in nullsec at the moment that's worth it are the Moon minerals. Also, there were stockpiles that were liquidated in order to raise funds in order to fight a war. So that's also what was kind of putting a downward pressure on the price of Moon minerals. So I think that is mostly played out, I think. But we don't know. The markets go up and down a lot of times depending on emotional things. But definitely you're going to see a strong demand for these ships. I think they're sexy as hell, and people are going to want to get into them that can't get into them. They're kind of a steep climb. You have to have Battleship 5, which is, I think, like a 27-day train. But if you can get into them, I think people want to get into them, experiment, especially if they're money makers. They may want to get in on that sort of thing before it gets nerfed in the future. Guys, you were awesome, right? I'd like to thank Ashterothi, Hateless, and Gregorian for hanging out with us today on Talking in Stations. And thank you guys. We will see you tomorrow on TIS.